and welcome to this inaugural episode of my podcast. My name is Antoinette Chanel. To those of you who know me, hello, thank you so much for being here. Those who don't know me, welcome to this episode. You're going to get to know me a little bit more through this first episode here. This podcast is titled Dead by Thursday. I gave it that title because at this point in my life, with everything I have to do, taking care of my two kids, running my business, being a wife, being a friend, being a 38-year-old in this crazy world, usually by the time Thursday rolls up, I'm pretty tired during the week. And so I usually am out of energy and zapped, and whatever's been going on that week is usually taking my attention, and I'm reflecting on it at some point during Thursday. So that's where the show gets its title from. And for its first episode today, I'm going to be doing a story time type episode, and I'm going to be doing some coloring as I do the story time episode. The page that I'm going to be coloring today is actually from my book titled Connecting the Dots. So I released this on Amazon with my friend Aurelio Sanchez on November 1st, 2021. So if you want to pick up a copy, this book has affirmations in it. It also has some designs that I'm going to color. These are designs that Aurelio created. So yeah, that's how this format's going to go. The other format that I have is going to be more scripted. So those of you who are used to listening to my content from the Midday Reset podcast, you might remember what those episodes are like. Those are much more structured, and I will have some of those on this Dead by Thursday podcast as well. But for right now, I am jumping in with this storytime format. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to do a storytime format is because I wanted the opportunity to just kind of get some things off my chest and, get the opportunity to share and speak. And, if these are things that you can relate to, then by all means, I would love to hear about it in the comments. But I'm also someone who struggles with anxiety and depression. Right now, I am super depressed. It started with the shooting in Buffalo, and then it went to the shooting in Texas and the responses around that. It's all just been very disheartening and difficult to be an American citizen, as well as a parent in America and a woman in America, because recently we also had the Supreme Court overturn Roe versus Wade, which was the federal right to abortion that women had, as well as other rights to birth control and contraceptive, family planning, that type of stuff. So I selected my colors before I actually turned on my camera today, and picked some colors that I felt like complemented each other. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you're able to see that visual. But as far as what I wanted to discuss today, okay, so one thing that's really stressing me out is that it seems like the idea of critical thinking is falling by the wayside, and people are doing much less critical thinking in favor of more hive mentality or mob mindset, like one collective mind for the entire good, which is super scary because here in the United States, we have a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different kinds of people who just exist here. They have businesses, they contribute to society here. It's what we are. At one point, this country boasted that it was a melting pot. But when you have lots of differing viewpoints and opinions and all of that jazz, then you also open yourself up to a lot of different base groups that want their interests represented too, and that becomes challenging because everyone can't get what they want. But at one point in this country, it used to be okay to disagree with people. If you had an opinion that was different from somebody else's, then, it was, first of all, expected of you, because that's what people understood was part of the human experience, is that, people have differing opinions, because we all have differing experiences. But also, it's just something that we respect and we move on about. We don't sit and harp on, the fact that this person is a vegan and how could you be a vegan? That's such a weird way of life. Or the opposite, how is it that you could eat meat? You guys are so selfish, blah blah blah. It wasn't really like that. I grew up in the 90s, so I grew up at a time when they were really pushing diversity. So I was born in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s. So I witnessed, the rise of Captain Planet. On television, you had a lot of different representation from different groups. So Family Matters was sort of the realistic portrayal of what African American family life was looking like in the United States during the 90s. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, of course, everyone was watching that because it was just a cool show. Like it was a cool show to watch. So, that one was popular too. I didn't realize I was using the same color there. That's okay. I was trying to make more variation, but that's all right. I'll stick with it. So this idea of diversity and, people of different backgrounds coming together for a greater purpose and stuff, that was very much pushed in the 90s. And that's part of why it was okay, or at least I was taught in my, little bubble in Southern California that I grew up in. I was taught that it was good for people to branch out and learn about other cultures and embrace diversity and, let's learn some things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are giving up any part of ourselves. It doesn't mean that we are forfeiting any piece of our own identity just to learn something about someone else's identity. It seemed a lot easier to do that in the 1990s than it is right now, for sure. And it's kind of alarming because one thing that I will say is that the times that I've learned the most, those times usually came from when I was challenged the most. So when I had something brand new in front of me that I had never faced, that was challenging, that was a little bit scary, it was in those times that I often grew and learned the most. And so I feel like if we take away the opportunities for people to grow and learn, then we sort of create a society where nobody can stand being challenged. Nobody can stand having their ideologies questioned or having to explain even why they believe what they believe, which is where we are right now. People are very fragile about their ideologies and their mindset, and they think that if you get to know somebody else's mindset, somebody else's background, someone else's plight, then all of a sudden that means that you're erasing your own, which is so far from true. That's not at all even close to being factual, but here we are. And it's really too bad because I see that there are people who are parents who feel this way. Parents who feel like it's my duty to raise my child to embrace this culture that I love and only this culture that I love. I must steer them clear of anything that is contrary to, whatever this little ecosystem is, whether that be the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or that is minimalism, a minimalist type culture that's very popular right now, and people are raising families within that. No problem, no shade or anything like that against it, but it's one of those things. Yeah, I don't know. I think social media, the rise of social media and the fact that social media has, infiltrated life so much and its negative effects were able to be unleashed on us before we were really cognizant of what it was doing to us. I think that all of those things are equating to a society that unfortunately is not very good at critical thinking, not very good at listening, not very good at being challenged, and not very good at, questioning itself. Like, our citizens are not very good at questioning themselves. People don't have a very rich sense of self-reflection, or at least it doesn't seem like people have much of a sense of self-reflection right now. Something that I used to really enjoy when I was younger was going to the skating rink. That was one of those pleasures that I didn't get to have for very long in my childhood because unfortunately the skating rink that was near my home was only open until I was like 15 or 16 years old, and then they closed it for good. I think they opened it back up for a little bit, but for the most part, they opened it up for special events, but it was never really operational the way that I had known it to be after my teen years. So I wasn't able to go back there when I was a young adult, unfortunately, which I would have really enjoyed because I enjoy skating and my husband now enjoys skating as well. So that would have been something fun to enjoy together. But I digress. When we used to go to the skating rink, I remember there was this sort of unspoken rule. You know, you just sort of skated around, and if you fell into a crowd of people, it just was what it was. And when I say fall into a crowd of people here, I'm not talking about actually falling. Like, I'm talking about you're skating, and then all of a sudden, here's like 3 or 4 people who you didn't arrive with, but they're skating near you. And you can probably hear my kids screaming in the background right now. I asked them to please keep it down while I was recording up here, and they stuck to that for like the first 5 minutes that I was recording this, and now they're not doing that anymore. So you're probably going to hear them screaming a lot, and that's just a part of my life because that's we're on summer break right now, so both of my kids are here at home. And yeah, they are having so much trouble finding things to do, which is hilarious, but anyway, back to what I was saying about the skating rink. It was just so easy. I feel like it wasn't, maybe it's because I was younger and that's part of why I didn't really have as many reservations too, but it just felt like it was so easy once you knew how to skate to just get out there and skate and have a good time and, you know, meet people, not necessarily lifelong connections or anything, just kind of, hey, I like this song too, and we're skating together to this at the same time. Like, fun stuff. I don't know. It seems like those sorts of opportunities for kids are fading away. We still have skating rinks. Like, there's a skating rink right here in town near us, not far from here at all. As a matter of fact, the kids just went there a couple of months ago for a birthday party for one of their friends. So it's not that skating doesn't exist. It's just that we don't have that free nature of just being curious anymore as people, and also just kind of going with the flow as people too. We don't really do that as much anymore. Now it seems like it's more important to know what is this person's political affiliation before I proceed any further, or let me check and see, you know, where does this person live, what part of town do they live in, is sort of an indication of their socioeconomic status, if you will, and then using that as a basis for whether or not that person is worthy of friendship or worthy of one's time, which is unfortunate because, like I said, growing up in the 1990s, I can remember a time when things just weren't like that. And again, if this sounds super naive to some of the older people listening, you're like, oh, well, you were just a child at that point, so that's why you didn't know what was really going on. I know there was problems back then too, but it just seemed like people were much more committed to trying to uphold decency and common courtesy and respect for one another, more so than now. Now we don't have any decorum. People are yelling over each other in the Senate and the House. We have politicians screaming and taunting the president during the State of the Union address. It's just absolutely insane. And I mean, the whole difference of opinion thing, I mean, that just is what it is. If you don't feel the same way, if you don't like what Biden does, I mean, you're entitled to that, by all means. But there was a time when if you had a difference of opinion with the president and you were a senator or a representative, then you handled that in the appropriate fashion because you wanted to maintain professionalism. The rest of the world is watching and can see how you carry yourself. And so, maybe instead of representing in an immature fashion, you put on your best behavior, because even though you're upset, you're still trying to represent nicely. I don't know. It just seems like that's all gone away. And I think that part of the reason why that's gone away is that we have started to prioritize feelings a lot. And I want to preface this, like, if I can I put an asterisk here wherever I'm able to, because I am very much a proponent of looking after and tending to mental health, taking the emotional temperature of situations, and making sure that people don't have to bend themselves completely out of shape and make themselves completely uncomfortable at any given time, because on the basis of things that they cannot change, such as their race or their gender. Well, I guess gender can be changed, but and sex can be changed too. But on the basis of things that are stuff that we can't change, as far as, what our eye color is, what our skin tone is, things like that. Going after people on those basis, it was sort of something that was just left off the table. Now it seems like when we argue, we have so many red herrings and ad hominems, and just people not paying any attention whatsoever to what the actual issues are, but instead are making it about other things. Okay, so as far as who I am a mother and a wife. I have 2 children, a girl and a boy, which is super awesome for me because I get to have both experiences, which is fun. Also, 2 was the magic number for the both of us, me and my husband. We decided 2 would be perfect. And so the fact that we got a boy and a girl is really awesome. I also am a small business owner. I am an author and publisher. So I started as an author. My first children's book that was released for widespread publication was a book for Black girls, which is a children's book I created to help uplift little Black girls. It's basically the love note that I have written, to my childhood self, because growing up in the 90s as a little Black girl in Southern California, I didn't have as many role models to look to, not in my personal life. There were a few on television and in movies and radio, but I could have used more. And so I just created something to leave that behind for little Black girls behind me. But that's not really the point of why I'm podcasting right now. I talk a lot about my work in my regular life, and people see me as someone who is a leader and a mentor, which I appreciate. But that's also really challenging to cope with, as I also am somebody who deals with anxiety and depression on a regular basis. I am an only child, and I spent a lot of my childhood alone, unfortunately. My parents were working a lot, so I was what you would call a latchkey kid. And basically what that means is that I would come home from school and I would let myself into my house, and I would make myself a snack and watch some television. And then my parents would come home when they were off work. So usually someone was getting home around like 6 o'clock in the evening. So from like around 2:30, 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, I was at home by myself as a child, and I didn't have any siblings. And there's pros and cons to that. I'm just going to talk about the pros for right now. It definitely made me somebody who's very okay with being independent. I'm comfortable with being alone. It's not always my preference to be alone, but I think that being comfortable with being by yourself is a skill. So if you're able to cultivate that in yourself, then it's something that's really useful. So that's one thing that I feel like I gained from my experience in childhood as a latchkey kid. There were other things too, but I'll mention those later. Anyway, so with that being said, having spent so much time alone means I got used to a lot of emotions and experiences alone that aren't necessarily meant to be had alone. So when it comes to traumatic experiences, such as getting into a fight, like if a child is bullied, or if they have a bullying experience, maybe it's not something that's ongoing, but just one traumatic experience where somebody bullied them or made fun of them in school. Usually a really nice way to follow that up is to have a talk with the child and let them air out their feelings. Let them know that, hey, what that person did wasn't okay. I'm sorry that that happened to you. But unfortunately, we also have people in this world who are just jerks. And so the sooner that you can get to a place where you don't feel as bad when somebody says those things or does those things to you, because you are sure of who you are and what you are, then the better. And so those kinds of conversations weren't really happening for me because my parents were often working, and then when they did come home, they were often tired. So there wasn't really a whole lot of room for a lot of that discussion. And I'm just going to say right now, because I just heard it, my kids, they love to shriek and scream and make all kinds of noise in the background. And even though I asked them to please be quiet because I'm recording in here right now, they are not going to be able to stay quiet the entire time I'm recording. And I heard some shrieking just now. So if you hear screams and shrieking, just know that that's my kids. I'm sitting in my office as I record this, which is part of the upstairs part of our house, which is where my two kids' bedrooms are located. So there's just always the opportunity for noise to get picked up in the background when I record up here. But, anyway, returning to my upbringing and also my mental health with regard to anxiety and depression, one also really key reason why I'm doing this podcast right now is that I unfortunately have had a return in I'm going to be cryptic right now because there's going to be part of this episode that goes up onto YouTube, and I know YouTube has some pretty strict guidelines. But the idea of self-deletion, if you will, I have had those experiences twice now, and it was just the ideas of self-deletion that I had. The first time this happened was when I was 14 years old, and my parents, they were talking about divorcing. They have since not divorced. They're still married. But at that time, when I was 14, they were talking of divorcing and, splitting assets. And I was going to have to pick which parent I wanted to live with most of the time. And none of that really sat nicely with me. I didn't understand how any of it was supposed to work. I just felt heartbroken in the moment. So that was the first time that I had ever had suicidal ideation. Oops, I said the word. Whoops. Gonna try not to do that anymore for the YouTube audience. And then the next time that I felt that way was when I had postpartum depression after I gave birth to my first child, which if there's anyone out there listening who either has experienced postpartum depression or you have watched someone else go through postpartum depression, it is no joke. It's really serious. And it sucks because you're like in this really weird place where you have this new baby that you're trying to get excited for because, that's what they tell you. You're supposed to be really excited that you have this new baby. And, this is this new thing that you're doing, but this is something that women have done for hundreds and hundreds of years. So you should just be able to snap into it and just get it already. But me, I was not that mom. And so that was another time that I had thoughts of self-harm and self-deletion ideation. And then just recently, very, very recently, so that last incident that I just mentioned with postpartum depression, that happened almost 9 years ago. Yeah, this later this year, it'll be almost 9 years ago. It will be 9 years ago later this year is what I mean to say. So with that being said, having those kinds of ideas return is unfortunate, but I also can sort of understand, from my own internal perspective, why that might be. Simply because lately there's just been so much tragedy and so much sadness, so much to just be sorrowful for. And it's been hard to watch, and it's been hard to cope with because it's been event after event after event. It's one thing if we have one tragic event and people are having trouble with coping with that one tragic event 6 months, a year, 2 years later. But we've had lots and lots of tragic events recently, like several back to back. And that's been hard. I mean, just the month of May alone, there was a shooting in Buffalo, which was racially motivated. And then there was a shooting in Uvalde, Texas that, I mean, who knows what the motive was behind that. But the victims involved small children and teachers. And those two events in and of themselves have been so heartbreaking for me. I haven't been able to move past them, but here we are. And right now, as I record this, it's July, and we've had several more shootings here in the United States since what I just mentioned. The tragedies, unfortunately, don't seem to be slowing down or stopping. And it just wears on you after a moment because, it's like, gosh, how much more of this am I going to have to endure? And why is there nothing more that's being done to prevent this from happening on a recurring basis, continuous basis? And then it's really easy to feel discouraged as well when you also have a Supreme Court that is making moves to restrict the reproductive rights of people. And I mean, I don't want to get into a large debate about abortion, really, because truthfully, abortion is a very nuanced topic. I have known women who were staunchly against abortion because they don't believe in it. I've known women who have had to seek abortion because, unfortunately, they were sexually assaulted. The R word. I have known women who had to seek abortion because they were not able to carry that child to term. Medically, there was going to be an issue that would have either harmed them or the baby or both. And so therefore it wouldn't have been a wise decision for them to carry to term. And so they aborted. I have known women who decided that the person who impregnated them was not responsible enough, and so therefore they didn't want to be liable for caring for a child for the rest of their life with that person. I've seen lots of different situations, known lots of different people, and heard different justifications for why certain people chose what they chose. I used to have really staunch opinions about this, but what I've realized is that because I don't want my own rights and liberties to ever be restricted, I therefore am not interested in going about trying to restrict the rights and liberties of other people. I think that making abortion illegal just creates more opportunities for the really bad types of abortions to happen, the type that are unsafe and unhealthy. But again, I don't want to have a huge debate about that. That's not what this episode is about. I really just am leading you down the path that brought me back to my self-harm ideation, which is, watching reproductive rights be restricted, hearing that the Supreme Court wants to go after more, and then the out of control violence with guns that's happening in the United States right now. All of those things just made me feel super depressed and shut into a hole and as if I didn't have any options. And then the self-harm thoughts came back up. And they're not necessarily gone. I'm not, I right now in this moment as I sit here, that's not something that I want to do. It's something that I am able to understand a little bit more. And I'm starting to question, is that really so bad a little bit more, the more that things continue to look grim? That's what I'll say. It's hard to find hope. And I'm somebody who a lot of people turn to for hope which might be why it's so acute for me when I feel like I'm having trouble with finding hope, because I know that there are other people who are counting on me to, be hopeful and to have hope so that they can have hope. But these last couple of months, it's been so hard to have hope. And I am doing the best that I can to try to push the negative thoughts and the useless thoughts out of the way so that I can be of service to the people around me who need me. But that's not always easy for me. And so, that's one of the reasons why having this podcast is sort of an outlet for me. It gives me a chance to color. Coloring is something that helps to reduce stress, helps to, I've had something else to focus on as I've been talking just now, and it's felt really nice. So, I'm trying to do something positive for my mental health and also kind of give people a glimpse into what my experience is like and, what my perspective is. I don't really see a lot of perspectives like mine represented from unambiguous Black women, not just Black women, but unambiguous Black women who don't necessarily represent a reality television show or an athlete spouse perspective. They're not like a baby mama or anything like that. I don't see a lot of those types of perspectives represented. And so that's another reason why I wanted to share too, because it seems like Americans and the American media treats unambiguous Black women as though we almost don't exist. Like regular Black women being moms and wives and, going to their jobs and taking care of their kids and, going on vacation. Like, I don't know, it's almost like no one's ever heard of that before sometimes. And so we don't really see that perspective represented as often. And, you don't necessarily have to be like a staunch conservative woman to have these ideals. There are Black women who are not necessarily liberal, not necessarily conservative, but, who just sort of fall in the middle. That perspective is not represented quite as much. And so I'm hoping that by sharing that, this will also give people more of an insight into, just kind of how I see the world and why I've made the contributions to the world that I have and why I do the work that I do, which is not the same kinds of things that lots of other people do. I tend to be kind of a trailblazer, and I'm a professional loner, which, as I've kind of hinted at from being a latchkey kid with my upbringing, it was sort of inevitable for me because I spent a lot of time alone, and so I got the opportunity to develop an independent spirit from that. So one thing that is an unfortunate development of our world right now is that we have this drop off in the popularity of critical thinking. People are not really thinking critically these days. They are more so thinking like, what does my favorite figurehead in this arena think? And then I'm just going to replicate that opinion because that makes me feel good to know that I have the same opinion as this person that I look up to for X, Y, and Z reasons. And on the surface, probably there's a lot of people who are going to hear this and think like, oh no, it's not like that. I don't do that. I'm not somebody who's like that. Everybody's like this to a degree. Everybody is just basically picking their own, they're picking their own preferences based off of what they are able to tolerate best, based off of what agitates them the least. And so, it's unfortunate though, because people are not exercising critical thinking and therefore they are not able to listen to differing perspectives, not able to stay open-minded to experiences that are different from theirs. And that just makes for such a rigid world. It's unfortunate. I really, when we get to a place like that where people are not interested in listening, they're not interested in challenging themselves, then I just see that as being so stagnant and so, I was going to call it boring, but, that's not the best term to use. I don't see us as a population that is able to grow and evolve and change as we need to in a world that is rapidly growing and changing and evolving if we can't be open-minded about the experience of being a human here on this earth. And one of the ways that I've actually seen this come true for myself is in the entire topic of trans rights and, this whole debate and issue of trans visibility and the rights that trans people have, and even just understanding why a person might identify as trans. I can tell you that 5 years ago, that was something I just absolutely knew nothing about. I had no interest, and I was kind of like gawking at it, like, ugh, that's stupid. I didn't see the value in that whatsoever, and I didn't see myself as being someone who needed to know about that or learn about that. Fast forward a little bit to maybe 3 years ago when I was a little bit more accepting, but it was still something that was, on the peripheral when it comes to issues that I'm willing to acknowledge or tackle or confront or things like that. Like, it was very, very fringe. But I figured, I can at least acknowledge this because my best friend has a sibling who identifies as trans. And because I have known this person for a while and have been pretty fond of this person for a while, that sort of got my attention to say, oh, okay, so now this is impacting somebody that I know, and so now I need to look a little bit closer. The same reason that all people become responsible and just... yeah, never claimed to be perfect. But anyway, once that came to light with someone that I knew, then I started looking a little bit closer, paying a little bit closer attention, and I started asking more questions a little bit. And then you fast forward to today in the year 2022, where I'm not going to even try to act like I'm some sort of a expert on trans rights or even, how trans people think or what their motives are, what they want, where they're headed, anything like that. I'm not trying to claim that at all, but I will say that I am much more open and receptive to the issues that come from the trans community because I feel like I am coming closer to a place of understanding them than I've ever been in my entire life. And that is a result of my ability to stay open to, trying to understand this. I was able to go from being somebody who just completely rejected the issue altogether to now being somebody who can say, hey, wait, there is something that's happening here. And, maybe as I learn more about this, I can lend my voice a little bit better, or at least know what I'm talking about a little bit better as this issue comes up in the future, because it's another one of those things that's not going to go away. So, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I was able to step outside of my comfort zone to explore something that was just completely foreign and new to me, that I didn't understand and that I wasn't necessarily trying to embrace at first. I won't say I completely, well, maybe I did. Maybe I completely rejected the whole idea of being trans at first, but I've slowly over the years come to see that no, that rejection was premature. And there's actually quite a bit for me to learn from this. So I'm just going to sit and observe and ask questions when appropriate. But, the same way that I want to have my plight respected as an unambiguous Black woman in the United States, I also need to make space for the plight of trans people in the United States and what that's like for them. And, like I said, I don't know everything. I don't understand it all. And I'm definitely not a spokesperson, not a guru, not trying to be. But I see how I've grown through that. And I really wish that I could get other parts of the United States to understand that part too. And not even so much for the kumbaya moment. Like, I really couldn't care less about the kumbaya moment. I really couldn't care less about Hands Across America. It's not about everyone having to be friends. Even though that vision in the 90s was so beautiful, of all of those kids of different ethnicities coming from different parts of the globe coming together to fight for the ecosystem and justice for the planet to make sure that the planet stays clean so that we can all enjoy these resources. That whole concept was really beautiful in the 90s, but I understand that it might not be the most realistic thing to expect as we move forward in this world that we have right now. This is a different world. That's fine. But we aren't even really so much coexisting with each other right now. Right now, here in the United States especially, if you have an issue with somebody, the way that you handle that is bang, bang, ba-bang, bang, bang, ba-bang, bang, 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 bang. And I see that as an unfortunate byproduct of the fact that we have stopped demanding critical thinking out of people. We've stopped demanding that people think for themselves and use their brains, and we've stopped rewarding that too through cancel culture and making sure that we punish people who have opinions that are different from ours. We've made it so that if you stick out with your opinions, if you are a loner, if you are the different one, then that is negative. That's something that you want to avoid. You don't want to be like that. And so the way that you avoid that, make sure that you follow the crowd, follow the hive mentality, follow what other people are telling you, and just go along with the okie doke. And, unfortunately, with people like that, they are, when you have somebody who has a fragile sense of identity like that, they have a fragile sense of integrity based on that, because they're just following. They don't actually have any basis through which they formed their ideas or opinions. Those people also don't handle opposition very well. And so when they are confronted with somebody who thinks differently from them, who lives differently from them, which is very common here in the United States, our population gets more and more mixed together by the month based on refugees that we take in and immigrants who come here both legally and illegally. All of it. You're just going to have so many different perspectives represented in a land like this that if you are not capable of facing opposition or speaking civilly to someone who has a difference in opinion from you, then, you're kind of doomed, because you're going to be flying off the rails all the time. And that's what I see happening right now with a lot of this gun violence that's being committed. I mean, people are wrapping it up in racial ideology and wrapping it up in, I'm not sure if anybody has determined if there was a religious motive. There was a shooting in an affluent community out in Southern California where I used to live. And, everybody was just kind of puzzled that, why would this happen here? And it happened at a church. I'm not sure if that was motivated by anything religious based there. I just know that it was a very sad day to hear about that tragedy happening there. But, it seems to me like people are unable to, they don't know what tools to reach for to cope with the things that they're going through. And so instead of coping in healthy ways, they are coping, if you will, I'm using air quotes, by reaching for violence and retaliation. And the other unfortunate aspect of this is that we don't have systems that hold people accountable appropriately. So even when we try to bring some justice in situations like that, like such as Uvalde, the police chief, or the head of the police operations at that school campus, he also was elected to the city council. Now, as of today's recording, I read that he had resigned. He had stepped down from that city council position because he was getting a lot of flack, I'm sure, from the public, who was like, how could they let him do this? But I mean, up until then, it's been like almost 6 weeks, I think, since the shooting happened, and he resumed that post, or he assumed that post. He was appointed, I think, within 2 weeks after the shooting had happened. So, he sat there for a little while before he decided that, okay, maybe this is not something that I can take. Maybe I need to be accountable for the failure that happened at the elementary school. But it's too bad, because I think about my children and their friends and the future that lays ahead of them. And I just worry about a future where our children will grow into adults who are interacting with adults who don't know how to handle differences of opinion, who don't know how to accept that not everyone lives the way that they live, and that it's okay as long as those people are not harming you, that person's not harming you, then there's no reason for alarm. It's kind of bleak. So, as I work to battle my depression and keep my anxiety at bay, one of the things that I try to do is come up with projects that I think will at least positively impact the future. That's part of why I like to write books, because I figure if I can reach the kids of today, then that'll make for hopefully healthier adults of tomorrow. But that's my plan of action as far as what I do instead of sitting around rocking back and forth and crying and worrying about my kids. I try to make books. I try to speak to kids in their schools, visit their classrooms, visit them at the library to let them know that they are important and that their contributions to this world and the future are needed, and that it's okay to have differences of opinion, and there's a way to do that where people don't have to feel threatened or disrespected. And I hope that they can embrace it, because I'm trying to model that as much as I can to my kids, which is not always easy, but I do the best that I can, and I try to give myself some slack. I live in the state of Florida, which is a fairly conservative state for the most part. And I would say that Florida is the kind of conservative that is radically conservative, in that not only are they interested in conservative ideals here in the state of Florida, but they want to take it to the extreme so that they can set a precedent, because Florida likes to stick out, kind of like how Texas likes to stick out. And so here we have the governor pushing very hard against critical race theory and, this whole don't say gay bill and stuff, which I still need to look into that, because quite honestly, don't say gay bill sounds really ridiculous to me. I keep laughing at it every time I hear that. I'm like, really? He proposed something called don't say gay? Wow, that's, Anywho, so, living in the state of Florida with, the kind of mentality and mindset that I have is a little difficult from time to time. But I'm also grateful for the challenge that brings me, because it affords me the opportunity to get to see how some of the conservative people operate and how their mindset works. Especially when it comes to linking things to their churches. It gives me an opportunity to see that up close, which is really a trip. It's crazy the way that some conservative people will link their faith, their church faith, and their political agendas, just wrap them up tight like a burrito. It's crazy. But I try to stay focused, and I give myself tunnel vision somewhat. And I focus on the good work that I can do, and I rest the rest of the time so that I can have the energy that I need to be the mom that I need to be, as well as the wife, as well as the author and publisher, all those good things that fill my life. So this art piece is done. I'm really excited. I hope Aurelio sees it and enjoys what I did with his art. I chose this art piece also because of the affirmation that appears next to it, which says, "Punch up always," one of the affirmations from Connecting the Dots. And I thought it went really nicely with the topic that I discussed today, regarding being able to agree to disagree and just have differences of opinion respectively, respectfully, because truthfully, the only people that we really need to be going after and canceling are the people who are pulling the strings behind the scenes, who made this whole system up that is keeping us all in difficult situations right now. So, don't get mad because there's someone who is an actress or an actor who is in favor that Roe v. Wade has been overturned. That person's entitled to their opinion. Instead, be angry that you have Supreme Court justices who unfortunately did not uphold their oath when they said that they were going to leave Roe v. Wade, as well as several other court cases alone, and not do anything with those. Be mad that our system is set up in such a way that our president can't do anything about these things when they get overturned like this, at least not immediately. There's stuff that can be done, but just not in the immediate like a lot of people are wanting. So just keep that in mind, my friends, and know that wherever you are, I am sending you love, and do the best that you can. Whatever that looks like today, just know that I'm going to be doing the same. And some days that looks really great and triumphant. Other days it's not so much. And please, by all means, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. Please also be sure to leave me a comment. Those of you who are watching this on Patreon, I'm not sure how that's going to work just yet, but leave me a comment. I love hearing from you. And if you're part of the YouTube audience, well, actually, part of the YouTube audience wouldn't be here right now because this is the second half. But thanks so much for coming on this journey with me, and I hope that you will join me for another episode. Be well and take care of yourselves.